I don't know if you've noticed this yet or not, but 2024 seems to be starting out where 2023 ended, and that is with popular YouTubers taking a dump on the venerable biscuit joiner. I don't know where this is coming from, unless everybody just has some drilling jig or fake domino affiliate link they're trying to share. What I can tell you is I've been using biscuit joiners now for 30 plus years, and they have their place. This is actually my second Porter Cable biscuit joiner. I've owned this one for over 20 years. And recently I showed a cordless Wen biscuit joiner that I bought just because it was such a great deal. Yeah, so this is the Shopsmith biscuit joiner. And in this video, we're going to talk about this tool, how to use it, a couple places where I would never use it. And I think it's one of those things that if you have it, why not use it? Now, here's the problem with biscuit joiners. Just like Kreg pocket hole jigs, once you get one, it seems like every problem is screaming for a biscuit. We're not going to get into that in this video, except for to say there are lots of places where biscuits don't make sense, just as there are several places that pocket hole screws make no sense. But let's talk about how we would use this tool. First off, in the normal use, this gets installed on the Shopsmith in the drill press position. So let's get to that position now. So this is made up of just a couple pieces, actually. The main body incorporates both the housing that's going to clamp onto the quill and the dust chute. And then we have a spring-loaded face or fence on here that's going to actually allow us to plunge our stock into the blade. On the bottom of this, you can see there's a plate that's just really there to retain the blade and the arbor and also to contain some sawdust. And that blade and arbor, right now they're loose. They're just down inside of this. And the arbor has a set screw. Normally what I'll do, just to kind of aid myself in this process, is I'll put my wrench onto the set screw into the arbor. And I want to make sure when I install this, that is going to go onto my quill and align up with the flat. The flat that's on that spindle aligns with that set screw right there. So as I install this, I'm going to put these all the way up and tighten that down onto the flat. Now I can then, I'm lifting this right now, I can then align the front of this any direction I like. For right now, we'll just face it this direction towards the front and tighten that down. Now normally we use this with the quill extended an inch or so. And the main reason we're doing that is to give ourselves room for our dust collector hose, which will pass in this situation between these tubes. Now that puts me further away from my table than I like, so I can either lower the headstock down or I can raise the table up in order to get myself where I want. And I'm going to go ahead and raise the table up. And I'm going to hook up my dust collector. Now notice as we plunge in, that is going to expose that blade, and that's what's going to do the cutting. And on this face, there happens to be some peel and stick abrasive. That was an optional accessory. I think it's a smart accessory. If you don't have that, you can use double-sided tape and just use some fine abrasive. They've cut this in such a way so that it doesn't interfere with the cutter. It also doesn't interfere with, there's a pin here and here that helps to keep your stock from moving. And then we also want access to these set screws right here on the face. So if I wanted to hit a particular mark on this stock, let's say here, I can press in and loosening the quill, I'm leaving it a little bit snug. I can move the biscuit joiner up and down in order to get that where I like it, and then we can tighten the quill down, okay? Now with biscuits, there are three typical sizes, 0, 10, and 20. They're all cut with the same diameter cutter. This is a 100 millimeter or roughly 4-inch diameter cutter, and it's 4 millimeters thick. All of them are the same. And how far we plunge in will determine how big of a slot this cutter is going to produce. You'll see that there are 3 different grooves on this rod. If I push this in to where I can just see that first groove flush with this face, that would be cutting to a depth for a number 0 biscuit. If I go into the second groove, that would be a 10 biscuit. And if I go all the way to that bottom groove, that would be a number 20 biscuit. Now, the original design for this biscuit joiner, when they were playing around with it, they actually had some clips that you would move and snap into these grooves, and they eventually abandoned that. I think a really good best practice here would be to wipe a little white out or white paint and then wipe off the excess so that you've got some pretty prominent lines here. But just understand that the way we adjust this is by pressing it in firmly, and then with the Shopsmith toolbox from the front, your 5/32 hex wrench, we can zero that in to where it'll stop at exactly the depth that you want. So a quick demonstration, if I were to want to add some biscuits here, I could just make some marks in my stock. I'm marking on what is the bad side because your most perfect face will be referenced from the tabletop itself. And so I'm going to want the good side down. I'll make my marks on the back. And while I have the full width of my shop here plunging straight in from the front, I don't quite have as much support here as I might like. So one of the things you can do is you can rotate the body of the biscuit joiner to any position you like. Let me disconnect the hose. And by simply loosening here and rotating around, if I set that to where it's set at about a 45-degree angle, I have a much bigger support surface here to support my stock. Now here's some examples. This is a 0, a 10, and number 20 biscuit. These are made from compressed red beech. And when you apply wood glue to these biscuits into the joint, they swell. And we'll just press these in. And I can tell my biscuits are already a bit swollen. This is what happens when you have biscuits in North Carolina. See if we can get this to go together. And we also have those occasions where we might want to join 2 boards together edge to face like this. And we can do that as long as the boards are not too wide. We can do that in the same configuration, just standing the stock up on edge like so. Boy, those are some tight biscuits. Ah, goodness. 10 biscuits. Everything is just so dang tight. right now. Anyway, here you can see we can join those boards together edge to face. Okay, how about miters or end grain joints? Let's say you want to do a stile and a rail type of a joint where you're going to have a joint in this face and one on the end, such as this. So let's go right here. This is going to take a little bit of planning because I'm going to have to think about what size biscuit can I use here. If I use too wide of a biscuit, it's going to blow out at the ends and it's going to be visible. Maybe on a face frame, it doesn't matter. Maybe I can have it blow out at the top because a countertop's going to be covering it, or it's going to be the top of a cabinet. Or I might want to go with a smaller size biscuit. I go with a 0 biscuit here. But for this demonstration, that's not what's a concern. The concern is, how am I going to plunge this end in? It's going to hit that cutter and it's going to want to slide. First, let's make this cut. Let's do that over here. For this, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this back around to where it's facing the front. And we're going to use the biscuit joiner in combination with our miter gauge. And we'll set our miter gauge to 90 degrees. And we're going to use that as a fence to help guide us in straight. Oh, you'll notice that my miter gauge is going to run right into the stock here, or into the edge of the biscuit joiner. Well, not if we extend our table out. That gets us right out the front. And ideally, we should have a piece of paper in here as well, so that when we expand our miter bar, it's not going to get stuck. Take the top off. And we'll align that. When we're happy with that position, we'll just tighten that set screw in the middle of the bar. And then this cut is going to go something like this. I missed my mark slightly. That's all right. We're still cutting for a number 20 biscuit. We can adjust the depth on that to make it cut for a 0 or a 10. All right, what about a miter? Literally coming in on the end of a miter. The problem with just rotating the face of this to 45 degrees, as we could do, is that might align me for a 45-degree plunge, but this would need to slide forward on the miter gauge, and that's going to be shifting the cut. So that's not how that's going to work. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the body around and face it towards the front fence rail, like so. Determine where we're going to make our biscuit joint. Right about there. And I can line this up and extend my table out till we align with our cut mark. plunge straight in. Now here's the problem. I may be able to swing this around 45 degrees and come from this side, but at some angles you might find that depending on the width of your stock, you might be running into the post here. So you may have to rotate this around and work from the other face, which is pretty straightforward. On a few of those cuts, you probably thought to yourself, oh my gosh, Scott's hands are awfully close. You're right, which is why Shopsmith included a push block with the biscuit joiner when they sold it. So those are the most common cuts that we're going to make with this, from edge to face, end grain to edge grain, and miters. There are others. One of the ones that you will rarely, if ever, see me use, and if you do see me doing it, it's just for your benefit, is trying to do something like a bookcase where I'm making slots in the face of a long board. I don't think that this machine is made to do that. In fact, it's not covered in the patents. And when Shopsmith figured out how to do it, it was such a sketchy thing that we were very careful that we only showed it during classes and that we gave all kinds of disclaimers. It's one of those places where there's absolutely a place for a handheld biscuit joiner in your shop. You know, when the parts get so big that they're awkward to take to the machine, it makes more sense to clamp the parts down and bring the machine to the part. I think that's one of those situations where you're much, much better off there. As I mentioned to you in a previous video where I talked about that cordless Wen biscuit joiner, for under 70 bucks, I think it's a steal if those are the kind of joints you're getting into. If you own this biscuit joiner, or you can get your hands on one on the used market, I think it's super handy to have for Shopsmith users. Very easy to install, very easy to align, quick and easy to use, as long as your table is accurate. If your table isn't properly aligned and the back is lower or higher than the front, or your table is not locked in at 90 degrees, then you're going to find that your slots will be completely misaligned. So I look forward to your questions, comments, and cheap shots. We'll do a follow-up video to answer those. Maybe I'll demonstrate that other technique that I don't like to do. But in the meantime, visit mygrowthrings.com and make it a great day. Gotta stop kicking this.